Jake Martinez knew he was in trouble when the engine made that sound. It was not the normal hum of a working ship engine. It was more like a dying animal. Smoke filled the cockpit of his cargo ship and red warning lights flashed everywhere. "Come on, baby," Jake said to his ship. Just a little bit more, but the ship did not listen. The engine died completely, and Jake felt his stomach drop as the ship fell toward the planet below. He had been flying cargo runs for 5 years, but this was his first real crash. The planet was called Zerion Prime. Jake knew it was a bad place. The company files said it had dangerous animals and no friendly people. Most pilots avoided it completely. Now Jake was going to land there whether he wanted to or not. He managed to crash land in a rocky valley. The ship hit the ground hard, but Jake was still alive. His head hurt and his left arm was bleeding, but he could walk. The ship was broken beyond repair. The engine was completely dead and the communication system was smashed. Jake looked around the valley. Red rock stretched in all directions. The sky was a strange purple color, and 2 suns hung overhead. It was very hot and the air smelled like metal and dust. He gathered what he could from the ship. A plasma torch for cutting metal, some food bars, a water recycler, emergency medical supplies. Not much, but it would have to be enough. Jake had been walking for 2 hours when he heard the screaming. It was not a human scream. The sound was higher and more musical, but Jake could tell it was a cry for help. He followed the sound through the rocks until he found a cave opening in the side of a cliff. The screaming came from deep inside the cave. Jake listened carefully. There were other sounds too, low growling and the scraping of claws on rock. Something was in there with whoever was screaming. Jake should have walked away. He was alone on a dangerous planet with limited supplies. Going into a cave full of unknown creatures was not smart. But the screaming continued and Jake could not ignore it. He turned on his plasma torch and stepped into the cave. The tunnel was narrow and dark. Jake moved slowly, following the sounds. The screaming had stopped, but he could hear whimpering now. And the growling was getting louder. The tunnel opened into a large chamber. Jake saw them immediately. 3 creatures that looked like giant lizards with too many teeth. They were covered in thick scales and had long claws. They surrounded something in the center of the chamber. Jake moved closer and saw what they were guarding. It was a woman, but not a human woman. Her skin was pale blue and she had long silver hair. She wore clothes that looked expensive, made from materials Jake had never seen. Her hands were tied behind her back and she had cuts on her arms and face. The creatures had not noticed Jake yet. They were too focused on their prisoner. Jake studied them carefully. They were big and strong, but they moved slowly. Their eyes were small, which meant they probably did not see very well in the dark. Jake had an idea. He found some loose rocks near the tunnel entrance. He threw one hard against the far wall of the chamber. The sound echoed loudly and all 3 creatures turned toward it. Jake threw another rock in a different direction. The creatures spread out, searching for the source of the noise. While they were distracted, Jake ran toward the prisoner. The blue-skinned woman looked up at him with large golden eyes. She said something in a language Jake did not understand, but her meaning was clear. She wanted him to get her out of there. Jake cut her ropes with his plasma torch. "Can you run?" he whispered. She nodded and stood up. She was taller than Jake and moved with the grace of a dancer. But Jake could see she was weak from being held captive. The creatures had figured out the rock trick. They turned back toward their prisoner and saw Jake. They roared and charged. Jake pushed the woman behind him and raised his plasma torch. The first creature leaped at him, claws extended. Jake dodged to the side and slashed with the torch. The plasma beam cut deep into the creature's shoulder, and it howled in pain. The second creature tried to circle around Jake. He grabbed one of his food bars and threw it hard at the creature's face. The bar hit its eye and the creature stumbled backward. "The tunnel," Jake shouted to the woman. "Go," she ran toward the exit. Jake backed away from the creatures, keeping his torch between them and himself. The wounded creature was bleeding but still dangerous. The other 2 were angry now and they moved faster. Jake reached into his emergency kit and pulled out a medical stimulant. It was meant to be injected into a person to keep them awake during emergencies. But Jake had a different idea. He threw the stimulant container at the nearest creature's face. The glass broke and the chemicals splashed into the creature's eyes. The creature screamed and clawed at its face. The stimulant was designed to affect nervous systems, and it was working on the creature too. It stumbled around blindly, crashing into the cave walls. Jake ran for the tunnel. The woman was waiting for him at the entrance, looking worried. Together they ran through the narrow passage toward the daylight. Behind them the creatures roared and gave chase. But they were too big for the narrow tunnel. They crashed into the walls and got stuck. Jake and the woman escaped into the valley. They did not stop running until they reached Jake's crashed ship. Only then did the woman speak, and Jake was surprised to hear her words in perfect English. "You saved my life," she said. "I am Princess Zaralyn of the Velthari Empire. And you, human, have just changed both of our destinies forever." Jake stared at the blue-skinned woman. A princess? He had just saved a real princess? He looked at his dirty clothes and bloody hands. He did not feel like someone who should be talking to royalty. "You are hurt," Princess Zaralyn said. She moved toward him with concern in her golden eyes. "Let me help you." Jake stepped back. "I am fine. Just some cuts. Nothing serious." He paused. "Did you say you are a princess?" She smiled, and Jake noticed her teeth were perfectly white and slightly pointed. "Yes, my father is Emperor Thexanol of the Velthari Empire. We control this sector of space." She looked at his crashed ship. "But right now I think we both need help." Jake nodded toward his broken communication system. "I cannot call for rescue. The radio is dead." "I can help with that," Zaralyn said. She reached into her torn clothing and pulled out a small silver device. She pressed several buttons and it began to glow. "This is a royal emergency beacon. My father's ships will find us soon." "Good," Jake said. "I can get a ride off this planet and you can go home safe." Zaralyn looked at him strangely. "It will not be that simple." Jake did not understand what she meant, but he did not have time to ask. Within an hour, the sky filled with ships. They were not like any ships Jake had ever seen. They looked like they were made of crystal and metal, and they moved without making any sound. The largest ship landed near them. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Soldiers came out wearing armor that seemed to be made of the same crystal material as the ship. They surrounded Jake and Zaralyn. An older Velthari male stepped forward. He was tall and wore robes covered in strange symbols. His skin was darker blue than Zaralyn's, and his silver hair was long and braided. "Daughter," he said in a deep voice, "we feared you were dead." "Father," Zaralyn replied. She knelt down and touched her forehead to the ground. "I live because of this human's courage." Emperor Thexanol looked at Jake for the first time. His golden eyes were sharp and intelligent. Jake felt like he was being measured and judged. "Human," the Emperor said. "You saved my daughter's life." "Yes, sir," Jake replied. He was not sure if he should kneel like the princess had done. Anyone would have done the same thing. The Emperor's expression changed. "No, not anyone. You risked your life for a stranger from another species. This shows great honor." He paused. "What is your name?" "Jake Martinez, sir. I am a cargo pilot for Morrison Shipping Company." Emperor Thexanol nodded slowly. Then he said something that made Jake's blood turn cold. "Jake Martinez, by the ancient laws of our people, you must marry my daughter." Jake felt his mouth fall open. "I'm sorry, sir. I think I did not hear you correctly." "You heard correctly," the Emperor said. "Any warrior who saves a royal daughter's life must marry her. This preserves the honor of our family and ensures the protection of our bloodline." Jake looked at Princess Zaralyn. She was looking at the ground and would not meet his eyes. "Sir, with respect, I'm just a pilot. I am not a warrior. I do not even know your customs." "You fought the Kethmori and won," the Emperor said. "You saved my daughter when my own guards failed. You are a warrior, whether you accept the title or not." Jake's mind raced. This had to be some kind of mistake. "Sir, I cannot marry your daughter. I do not know her. We are from different species. I have a job to do." The Emperor's face became very serious. "Are you refusing?" "I am trying to understand," Jake said carefully. "In human culture, people choose who they marry. They fall in love first." "Love?" Emperor Thexanol seemed confused by the word. "Marriage is about duty, honor, and the strength of families. Love is not important?" Princess Zaralyn finally looked up. "Father, perhaps we should explain more to him about our ways." The Emperor nodded. "Very well. Jake Martinez, come aboard my ship. We will return to our homeworld, and you will learn about the Velthari people." Jake did not feel like he had a choice. The soldiers were still surrounding him, and he was on a hostile planet with no way to leave. He followed them onto the crystal ship. The inside of the ship was even more amazing than the outside. Everything seemed to be made of light and metal. Jake had never seen technology like this. Princess Zaralyn walked beside him as they moved through the ship. "I am sorry," she said quietly. I should have warned you about our laws. Why did you not? Jake asked. Because I hoped my father might make an exception, she replied. But our laws are very old and very strong. Even an emperor cannot break them easily. They entered a large room with windows that showed the stars. Emperor Thexanol sat in a chair that looked like it was made of solid crystal. Sit, he commanded. Jake sat in a smaller chair across from him. Let me tell you about humans, the emperor said. We have been watching your species for many years. You are strange. You do not give up when any reasonable being would surrender. You find solutions where there should be none. You adapt to any environment. Jake listened carefully. My daughter was kidnapped by the Kethmori, the emperor continued. These creatures have killed hundreds of our warriors over the years. They are strong, fast, and very dangerous. Yet you, with only simple tools, defeated 3 of them and saved her life. I got lucky, Jake said. No, the emperor replied firmly. Luck does not explain what you did. You used tactics we would never think of. You turned your weaknesses into strengths. This is what humans do. Princess Zaralyn spoke up. Father, what if the human does not want to marry me? Emperor Thexanol looked at her with surprise. Want? This is not about wanting. This is about honor and law. But humans value choice, she said. Maybe we should consider their customs too. The emperor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, Jake Martinez, if you refuse to marry my daughter, it will be seen as an insult to our entire people. It could damage relations between humans and Velthari for generations. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was just one man, but his decision could affect the future of 2 species. Sir, Jake said slowly, I need time to think about this, and I need to understand more about what this marriage would mean. Very well, the emperor replied. You will stay on our homeworld as our guest. You will learn our ways, and in 1 month you will give me your answer. Jake looked at Princess Zaralyn. She was watching him with those golden eyes, and he thought he saw hope in them, or maybe fear. He could not tell which. 1 month, Jake agreed. He had no idea what he was going to do, but at least he had time to figure it out. The ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying Jake toward a future he never could have imagined. The Velthari homeworld was beautiful and strange. The cities were made of the same crystal material as their ships, and they grew up from the ground like giant trees. The sky was always twilight, with 3 moons hanging overhead like glowing pearls. Jake had been there for 2 weeks, and he was beginning to understand how complicated his situation really was. The nobles are not happy, Princess Zaralyn told him as they walked through the royal gardens. Half of them think humans are too primitive to marry into the royal family. The other half think humans are too dangerous. Jake watched strange flowers that seemed to glow with their own light. What do you think? I think they are afraid, she said. Change frightens people even when it might be good for them. Jake had been learning about Velthari politics. The empire was old and powerful, but it had not grown in hundreds of years. They were stuck in their ways, following the same patterns their ancestors had used. Your father seems to want this marriage, Jake said. Zaralyn nodded. He has been studying human history. He thinks your people have something we have lost. What is that? The ability to see new possibilities, she replied. To find ways forward when the old ways do not work anymore. That evening, Jake attended another council meeting. The Velthari nobles sat in a circle around Emperor Thexanol, arguing about the marriage. Jake was beginning to recognize the different factions. Lord Vexmore was the leader of those who opposed the marriage. He was an old Velthari with scars on his face and hands. Humans are barbarians, he said. They solve everything with violence. Do we want this in our royal bloodline? Lady Neitha disagreed. Humans are unpredictable. That makes them dangerous allies and dangerous enemies. It is better to have them as family than as strangers. The law is clear, said Lord Carden. The human saved the princess. He must marry her or our honor is lost. Jake listened to them argue about his life like he was not even there. Finally, he stood up. May I speak? He asked. The nobles fell silent. Emperor Thexanol nodded. I have been thinking about something, Jake said. Princess Zaralyn was kidnapped by the Kethmori. But the Kethmori are not intelligent enough to plan a kidnapping. They are animals. They react to threats and hunt for food. They do not make complex plans. Lord Vexmore looked angry. What are you suggesting, human? I'm suggesting that someone help them, Jake replied. Someone who knew the princess would be traveling through that area. Someone who wanted her captured or killed. The room erupted in angry voices. Several nobles jumped to their feet. "How dare you accuse us?" Lord Carden shouted. "I am not accusing anyone," Jake said calmly. "I am just saying what I observed." The Kethamori had a trap waiting. They knew exactly where to find her. Emperor Thexanol raised his hand for silence. "Explain your reasoning, Jake Martinez." Jake had been thinking about this for days. The princess was traveling with royal guards. The Kethamori attacked at the exact spot where the guards would be most vulnerable. They separated her from her protection and took her to a specific cave. This was not random. Princess Zaralyn was staring at him with wide eyes. "You think someone in the court betrayed me?" "I think someone wanted you out of the way," Jake said. "The question is why." Lord Vexmore stood up abruptly. "This is nonsense. The human is trying to create problems where none exist." But Jake noticed something interesting. 3 other nobles had also stood up when Vexmore did. They were all looking nervous now. "Sit down, Vexmore," the Emperor commanded. "Let the human finish his thoughts," Jake continued. "Princess Zaralyn is next in line for the throne. If something happened to her, who would benefit?" "Her cousin, Lord Telvor," Lady Neitha said quietly. "He is the next heir." Jake looked around the room. "Where is Lord Telvor tonight?" "He is traveling," Lord Vexmore said quickly. "On business for the Empire." "What kind of business?" the Emperor asked. His voice was very quiet, which Jake had learned was a dangerous sign. Vexmore hesitated. "Trade negotiations with the Zephyrian Consortium." Princess Zaralyn shook her head. "That is impossible. The Zephyrians are at war with the Consortium. There are no trade negotiations." The room fell silent. Jake could see the Emperor's face growing darker. "Vexmore," the Emperor said, "you will explain yourself. Now." Lord Vexmore looked around the room like a trapped animal. The other nervous nobles were backing away from him. "The princess was weak," Vexmore said finally. "She spends too much time studying other cultures instead of focusing on Velthari's strength. Telvor would have been a better ruler." "So you arranged for her to be killed," Jake said. "The Kethamori were supposed to kill her quickly," Vexmore replied. "It should have looked like an accident. But she survived longer than expected." Princess Zaralyn stood up and Jake could see she was angry. "You murdered my guards. Good soldiers who served our family for years." "They died for the good of the Empire," Vexmore said. Emperor Thexanol's voice was like ice. "Guards, arrest Lord Vexmore and his conspirators." The crystal-armored soldiers moved quickly. They surrounded Vexmore and the 3 nobles who had stood with him. One of the conspirators tried to run, but the guards caught him easily. "Father," Princess Zaralyn said, "how many others were involved?" "We will find out," the Emperor replied. He looked at Jake with new respect. "Your human mind sees patterns that we missed. This is exactly why I want your genetics in our family line." Jake felt uncomfortable being talked about like a breeding animal. "Sir, I just noticed things that did not make sense. Anyone could have done the same thing." "No," Princess Zaralyn said. "I lived through that attack and I never questioned how it happened. You saw the truth in 2 weeks that we missed for months." After the conspirators were taken away, Jake and Zaralyn walked out onto a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life twice now." "I just asked questions," Jake replied. "You did more than that," Zaralyn said. "You showed us that our old ways of thinking are not enough anymore. We need new perspectives." Jake looked at her. In the moonlight, her blue skin seemed to glow. "Is that why you want this marriage? For new perspectives?" "At first, yes," she admitted. "I thought it would be a political necessity. But now what?" "Now I think it might be something more," she said quietly. "You are not like anyone I have ever met. You see possibilities where others see only problems." Jake felt something change between them. For the first time, he was not thinking about duty or politics. He was thinking about the intelligent, brave woman standing next to him. "Zaralyn," he said, "what if we tried to make this work? Not because of laws or politics, but because we choose to?" She smiled and Jake saw hope in her golden eyes. "I would like that very much." But Jake knew their problems were not over. The conspiracy had been uncovered, but there would be other challenges. Some Velthari would never accept a human in the royal family, and Jake still had to figure out what kind of life he could build in this strange, beautiful world. At least now he would not be facing those challenges alone. The next morning brought bad news. Lord Telvor had returned from his fake trade mission with a small army of supporters. Word had spread about his cousin's engagement to a human, and many Velthari nobles were angry. He is demanding the right to challenge the marriage, Princess Zara Lynn told Jake as they met in the royal library. According to our laws, any noble can challenge a royal marriage if they believe it will harm the empire. Jake was reading a book about Velthari combat traditions. What does that mean exactly? It means trial by combat, she replied. You would have to fight Telvor and any champion he chooses. Jake looked up from his book. How many champions can he choose? As many as he wants, Zara Lynn said quietly.
And Jake, these will not be like the Kethmori.
Velthari warriors train their whole lives for combat. They are faster and stronger than humans. Jake closed the book and smiled. But they are not smarter. That afternoon, Lord Telvor made his formal challenge in the throne room. He was younger than Zara Lynn, with pale blue skin and cold silver eyes. He moved like a trained fighter, and Jake could see the confidence in his posture. Emperor Thexanol, Telvor said, I challenge this marriage. Humans are inferior beings. They have no honor, no tradition, and no place in our royal bloodline. Jake stood up from his seat beside the throne. I accept your challenge, Lord Telvor. Telvor smiled. Good. I have chosen 5 champions to fight with me. We will face you in the combat arena tomorrow at dawn. 5 champions? Jake asked. Plus yourself? That makes 6 against 1. Velthari law allows it, Telvor replied. If you are truly worthy of marrying a princess, you should be able to defeat any number of opponents. Jake nodded. I understand. But I would like to make this more interesting. Emperor Thexanol leaned forward in his throne. What do you propose? I want to choose the weapons and the fighting conditions, Jake said. Since I am outnumbered, it seems fair that I should have some advantages. Telvor laughed. Very well, human. Choose your weapons. It will not matter. Jake spent the evening preparing. Princess Zara Lynn helped him study the combat arena and the fighting styles of his opponents. Telvor is an expert with the plasma blade, she said, showing Jake images of the weapons. Commander Zelak uses a neural whip that can stun you from a distance. Captain Morven fights with twin energy staffs. Jake studied each opponent carefully. They were all bigger, faster, and stronger than he was. In a fair fight, he would lose quickly. Good thing I do not plan to fight fair, he said. The combat arena was a large circular space with crystal walls. Thousands of Velthari had come to watch the human fight for the right to marry their princess. Jake could feel their skeptical eyes on him as he entered the arena. Telvor and his 5 champions stood at the far end. They wore traditional combat armor and carried their chosen weapons. They looked confident and ready. Jake wore simple human clothes and carried a bag of equipment he had gathered from around the palace. What are your weapons, human? Telvor called out. Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a handful of small metal spheres. These, he said. The crowd laughed. The spheres looked like children's toys compared to the Velthari energy weapons. What are they? Telvor demanded. Ball bearings, Jake replied. From your spaceship engines. The referee, an old Velthari judge, looked confused. Are these weapons approved for combat? They are metal spheres, Jake said. Nothing more, nothing less. Surely they cannot be considered unfair against plasma blades and energy staffs. The judge nodded reluctantly. Very well. Let the combat begin. Telvor and his champions spread out in a line and began to advance. Jake stood in the center of the arena, apparently trapped. But Jake had spent years loading and unloading cargo ships. He knew how to move heavy objects efficiently. And he had noticed something about the arena that the Velthari had not considered. The crystal walls were perfectly smooth and angled. Sound and light bounced off them in predictable patterns. Jake threw his first ball bearing not at his opponents but at the wall behind them. The small metal sphere hit the crystal surface and bounced at exactly the angle Jake had calculated. It struck Commander Zelak in the back of the head, stunning him. The crowd gasped. They had never seen anything like this. Telvor charged forward with his plasma blade raised. Jake threw 3 more ball bearings at different walls. They bounced around the arena like bullets, forcing the Velthari warriors to dodge and stumble. Stand still and fight, Telvor shouted. No, Jake replied. He threw 2 ball bearings directly at Captain Morven's feet. The captain stepped backward to avoid them and tripped over his own energy staff. Jake had studied human military history in school. He remembered reading about ancient Earth battles where smaller armies defeated larger ones through superior tactics and use of terrain. The Velthari, warriors, were trained to fight in open space with honor and tradition. Jake was using the arena itself as a weapon, turning their size and strength against them. He pulled out a small mirror from his bag and angled it to reflect the arena's lighting into Telvor's eyes. The Velthari lord stumbled backward, temporarily blinded. "This is not honorable combat," one of the champions shouted. "Honor is for people who can afford it," Jake replied, quoting something his grandfather had told him about surviving difficult times. Jake continued to move around the arena, using the walls, the lighting, and even the sound effects to confuse and disorient his opponents. He threw ball bearings in complex patterns that created a web of bouncing metal spheres. One by one, the champions fell. Commander Zelak was knocked unconscious by a ball bearing that bounced off 3 walls before hitting him. Captain Morven slipped on scattered spheres and hit his head on the arena floor. Soon only Telvor was left standing. He was angry now, his cold control replaced by rage. "Fight me properly," he demanded. "Face me with honor." Jake stopped moving and faced him directly. "You want honor? Fine. But first answer me this. Where were you really during your cousin's kidnapping?" Telvor's face went pale. "I told you. I was on a trade mission." "No," Jake said loudly so the whole arena could hear. "You were on Zarian Prime. You paid the Kethmori to kill Princess Zara Lynn." The crowd erupted in angry voices. Telvor looked around desperately. "Prove it," he shouted. Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a small crystal device. "I found this in your quarters last night. It is a Kethmori communication device. Humans are very good at finding things that are hidden." Telvor's plasma blade wavered in his hand. "That proves nothing. It proves you can communicate with creatures that supposedly have no intelligence," Jake said. "It proves you have been controlling them for months, using them to attack trade ships and make the Outer Rim dangerous." Princess Zarlin stood up in the royal viewing box. "Father, is this true?" Emperor Thexanol's face was dark with anger. "We will investigate immediately." Telvor realized he was trapped. With a desperate cry, he charged at Jake with his plasma blade. Jake had been waiting for this. He threw his last ball bearing straight up into the air and then dove to the side. Telvor's blade missed him by inches. The ball bearing came down and hit Telvor's weapon hand. The plasma blade flew across the arena and clattered against the wall. Jake stood up and looked down at his defeated opponent. "I win." The arena was silent for a moment. Then Princess Zaralyn began to clap. Slowly, other Velthari joined her until the whole arena was filled with applause. Jake had not just won a fight. He had shown the Velthari people something new about how problems could be solved. He had proven that humans belonged in their universe, not as servants or enemies, but as equals. And he had earned the right to marry the woman he was beginning to love. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The Velthari had combined their ancient traditions with human customs that Princess Zaralyn had researched. The result was something beautiful and strange that belonged to both cultures. The ceremony took place in the Crystal Gardens, under the light of 3 moons. Thousands of Velthari attended, along with the first human diplomatic delegation to ever visit their world. Ambassador Kate Sullivan had arrived 3 days earlier, bringing official greetings from the human colonial authority. "I have to admit," Ambassador Sullivan told Jake before the ceremony, "when we heard about this situation, we thought it was a disaster. Now I think it might be the best thing that ever happened to human-Velthari relations." Jake wore a combination of human formal wear and Velthari ceremonial robes. The blue fabric felt strange against his skin, but he was getting used to strange things. Princess Zaralyn looked stunning in a dress that seemed to be made of starlight and crystal. Her silver hair was braided with tiny gems that caught the moonlight, and her golden eyes shone with happiness. Emperor Thexanol performed the ceremony himself. He spoke in both languages, mixing Velthari honor pledges with human wedding vows. "Do you?" Jake Martinez promised to stand beside Zaralyn in strength and in weakness, in peace and in conflict, bringing the wisdom of your people to ours. "I do," Jake said. "Do you, Princess Zaralyn, promise to stand beside Jake in all things, sharing the knowledge of our people with his, building bridges between our worlds?" "I do," she replied. When they kissed to seal their marriage, the crowd cheered in 3 different languages: human, Velthari, and the trade language that merchants use throughout the galaxy. But the real celebration began at the reception. Jake watched as humans and Velthari mixed together, sharing stories and comparing cultures. He saw Ambassador Sullivan deep in conversation with several Velthari generals, discussing joint military exercises. Human engineers were talking excitedly with Velthari scientists about combining their technologies. "You have started something important," Emperor Thexanol told Jake as they stood on a balcony overlooking the celebration. "This marriage is just the beginning." "What do you mean, sir?" Jake asked. "I mean that our people have been stuck for too long," the Emperor replied. "We have great technology and old wisdom, but we have forgotten how to adapt. Humans remember how to change and grow." Jake nodded. "And Velthari knowledge could help humans expand safely into parts of the galaxy we never thought possible." "Exactly," the Emperor said, "which is why I have a proposal for you." Jake waited. "I want to create a new position in our government," Emperor Thexanol continued. "Cultural liaison and strategic advisor. Someone who can help both our peoples learn from each other." "You want me to be a bridge between humans and Velthari," Jake said. "More than that," the Emperor replied. "I want you to help us think differently, to see problems the way humans see them, to find solutions we would never consider." Jake looked out at the mixed crowd below. "What about my new wife? What does she think about this?" "Why do you not ask her yourself?" Zarlin said, stepping up beside them. She had been listening to their conversation. "Well?" Jake asked her. "I think it is perfect," she said, taking his hand. "I have been studying human colonies for months. I want to visit them, to see how humans adapt to new worlds. And I want to help Velthari learn to be more flexible." Jake smiled. "So we would travel together? Learn from both cultures?" "As partners," she agreed. "In marriage and in work." 3 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of a new kind of ship. It was built with both human and Velthari technology, combining the best of both designs. Half the crew was human, half Velthari. They were on their way to establish the first joint colony on a world neither species could have settled alone. "Status report," Jake called out. "Human life support systems." "Functioning normally," reported Chief Engineer Pete. Collins. "Velthari atmospheric processors online and stable." Added Science Officer Linara. Jake looked at the planet growing larger on the view screen. It was a beautiful world with purple oceans and golden continents. It was also extremely dangerous with violent storms and radiation levels that would kill most species. But humans could adapt to the radiation, and Velthari technology could control the storms. Together they could build something neither could accomplish alone. "Beginning landing approach," announced the pilot. A young Velthari named Keksun, who had learned to fly using human techniques. Princess Zaralyn stood beside Jake, watching the planet approach. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Always," Jake replied. "But that is what makes it exciting." "I used to think humans were reckless," she said. "Now I understand that you are not reckless. You are brave. There is a difference." "And I used to think Velthari were too formal and rigid," Jake said. "Now I know that your traditions give you strength and wisdom that humans need to learn." The ship landed smoothly on the planet's surface. Through the viewports, Jake could see the alien landscape stretching to the horizon. Soon, this empty world would be home to families from both species. Children would grow up here speaking both languages, learning both cultures. "Ready?" Zaralyn asked. Jake took her hand. "Ready." They walked to the ship's exit together. Outside, teams of human and Velthari workers were already beginning to build the first structures of the colony. Jake could hear them calling out to each other in mixed languages, sharing jokes and solving problems together. Ambassador Sullivan had been right. What started as a potential disaster had become the best thing that ever happened to both species. Jake remembered the day he crashed on Zerion Prime, thinking he was just a cargo pilot having bad luck. He never could have imagined that saving one person's life would change the fate of 2 civilizations. But then again, that was what humans did best. They found possibilities where others saw only problems. They turned disasters into opportunities. They built bridges where others saw only walls. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, they found love in the most unexpected places. As Jake and Zaralyn stepped out onto the surface of their new world, Jake smiled. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and difficulties neither of them could predict. But they would face it together, as partners and equals, bringing the best of both their peoples to whatever came next. And that was enough. More than enough, it was perfect.